Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
It's all about coaching for relevance. That's what he does. Yes, Marshall Goldsmith, certified coach. Amazing. I mean, man of many titles. I could spend a whole 20 minutes talking about what he does. Randy Swaim, welcome back.
Glad to be here.
You're the pilot. Amazing. I mean,
Yep.
that's like, I can't even go into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, company, and I know you want to dive right into how you want to help people out there.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, as you know, my background, I know what it's like to have lived your dream because, and you've heard me say this before. When I got out of college, I bored every romantic relationship I had early on because, everybody has their goals in life and all this, great career and all this. And I only had two goals in my life when I got out of college that I was vision of, and I wanted to fly the F-4 Phantom and I wanted to fly a Learjet. And that's all I ever talked about. So it was that. But I know what it's like. I've been able to live that dream, and some of the experiences and some of the people with whom I served have been amazing. And in fact, I'll share one little insight on that here as we get going. But then what I realize is the extent to which a real leadership coaching development style has became my style because of the people that I served with and things that I observed and learned from and all of that. And so back about 14 years ago, I started my own company, Coaching for Relevance. And my whole vision and passion is to bring freedom to potential and all those across my path. And I'm also a certified neuroplastician. So I'm with Institute for Organizational Neuroscience over in Europe. And so we just got a lot of insights there that are aligned with that. So that's my passion. And Jill, I think you've heard me say this before, but 20 years after I'm take my last breath, I don't mind if people don't remember my name. But what I hope is that there's people that remember there was this guy 20 years ago and he brought this interesting insight. And you know what? I apply it to my life and it's revolutionized my life. And so it's that's what I want to bring to people to make a difference. And hopefully that legacy, even if my name is not remembered, that legacy will have an impact, for years into the future.
It sure will. Absolutely. Yay. So excited to have you here. And wow, with all your leadership skills and encouragement and coaching, you go on and on and on. This is a man who's never going to retire, right? What is retirement to you?
Well, as I jokingly say that I've had people ask me routinely because I'm 69 years old now, and I've had so many people say, "When are you going to retire?" And I look at them and I say, "When I take my last breath," because unlike some, I'm going to run through the tape, kind of thing. So it's
Beautiful.
just, I want to I want to leave an impact. I want to, bring a positive insight or whatever right up until I lay down and take that last breath. That's what I want to be doing. So that's what I'm going to be doing in different aspects. But yeah,
Beautiful. Thank you. Oh gosh.
it's
So
a little
what
different.
words of encouragement and advice do you have for us today? People listening out there, I know if you guys, really to excel, to make your life better. I mean, a lot of us want that, but we don't know how to get there. And you're one of those guys who want to guide us and always have some words of wisdom and
Yeah.
obviously your coaching programs.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I'll bring today, and we can actually, if there are listeners and they want to send in questions, they're welcome to. But bring a little bit of an insight that sometimes people don't think about. And what I'll do is I'll start it this way to those people that are listening, perhaps that are managers and people leading teams and things like that, is to what extent do you really need to kind of adapt or change what you're doing to truly bring out the real synergy and capability and quality in your other people? And I will just share with you that is a lot more deeper, and it's not just an academic superficial thing. And in fact, I'll just give you one little picture from my background on it. And then we can kind of, enjoy some discussion and stuff. But you remember, I mentioned that back when I was in the Air Force and I was signed to the 4th Tactical Fighter Wing in F4s at the time, and I was in the 335th Chiefs, which historically has been one of the top squadrons in the Air Force. And they actually don't know if this still record it still holds today, but they were at least the first fighter squadron in history that reached 100,000 hours of accident-free flying in what they did. And they were actually awarded that while I was there. But you've probably heard me say this, Jill. I think you have, that one of the top leaders that I've ever known and served with was at the time Lieutenant Colonel Richard B. Myers. And he actually became General Richard B. Myers, and he was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from 2001 up until around 2005. And you've heard me say this, that to this day, if he ever sees this, to this day, he is the most solid, the best leader I've ever seen or served with. And it wasn't because of anything that he specifically told me. It's because everything that I experienced and observed with him and how the team came together, how the squadron was unified and all of that sort of stuff. And so, but there was a thing, and I'll just kind of throw this out very quickly. When you talk about this aspect of really generating that aspect of true synergy, true belief, true oneness, true success in your people, that is not something that you tell them and throw at them. That is something that is developed inside of them. And so how do you need to do that? And there was this one case where, this was way back when I was a first lieutenant. So it was like around 1982 or 3, probably, kind of thing. And back in those days. And yep, I'm dating myself with that. But in any event, it was back when I was a first lieutenant, and Colonel at the time, Colonel Myers was the squadron commander. And there came a time where the squadron was going to have to offer somebody to go up and take a year of experience in the wing command post up at the wing headquarters. But that means that your amount of flying is going to be reduced just a little bit, because that's going to be your sort of primary function. Initially, you'll still maintain your currencies and all that kind of stuff in flying. But there was about 4 lieutenants, and I had a role in our weapons office, and the other 3 lieutenants had a role in different other areas of scheduling or, training, that kind of thing. And Colonel Myers wasn't sure who to pick, because he knew that most people would not like to do that, because it's almost like having you sort of step away from what you really want to do. And I'll never forget this, because on the day where we knew he was going to have to make a choice, I kind of walked into his office and I knocked on the door, and he invited me in. I said, "Hey, sir, just wondering if you've identified who's going to go up to the command post for a while." And he was sitting in his chair like this, and he looked at me, and all he did is went like this. And he took his finger and he pointed at me. He said, "You." And most people, and I think he was sort of expecting this aspect of somebody going, "Oh, okay, sir," kind of thing. Well, when he pointed his finger at me and said, "You, Randy," I looked at him and I smiled and I said, "Sir, they're going to see chief standards for the next year." And he kind of smiled in appreciation. And I walked out, and I, went up to the headquarters and found out what all I was going to have to do and all of that kind of stuff. But it's interesting, that is not something that he told me. It's not something that anybody required of me. It's not something that whatever. It's something that what a lot of people on teams sense is, that's not really what I want to do, perhaps. And as a leader, how do you really get them so that they have that kind of reaction, as opposed to a very negative reaction? And what's interesting, I think I shared this with you on a previous show a while back, but that's also up in the command post is it was about 6 or 8 months later. where the deputy commander for operations, a full bird colonel, walked in and apologized to me in front of a whole room of officers because of something that he misunderstood or misinterpreted. And he realized that I was right. And he came in and was actually apologized to me in front of a whole room of officers. But you know what? When you think about that sort of synergy and oneness and team love and wanting to be there, wanting to represent your team well, if your whole mindset is about your own credit, you're not getting the job done. And and if you do want to instill and develop that kind of belief and feeling and that real oneness and that real there inside of people, that doesn't happen because you tell them things. That happens because you interact with them in such a way that everything internal of them kind of rises to meet that. And the thing I leave for some of the listeners is just this simple aspect of, what do you need to do differently in your team to be able to instill that sort of self-development and growth and becoming in your members in such a way where they're not just trying to, okay, just fit what he told me, but it's like they don't want to do it any other way. That's the way our team wants to do it. That's the way our leader wants to do it. But man, I don't want to do it any other way. I want to represent it all well. And that's huge when you're talking about true leadership, particularly in a current society and in a current, organizational maneuverability concept where, things are not just purely academic all the time. And the thing that I just kind of bring out is just this simple idea that when you're talking about doing that as it's one of the things I think that differentiates leaders from pure managers, because leaders understand that insight and they understand and they connect with their people in such a way so that a few weeks down the road, if something comes up, my team responds that way and I didn't have to force them to do it. It's amazing. One of the things that I've found in a lot of my journey, in fact, I was on a Zoom call this morning with my colleague in Europe with my autobiography that's getting very close to being published and everything, that when I look back at my journey, I'm amazed at how many times some incredible positive things happened, but they didn't have to. I didn't ask for them. And I've shared some of these on radio shows before, on PBNN and stuff. One of them was when I graduated from college, and that what that Math 501 professor said. He didn't have to do that. I didn't ask him to. But I'm amazed at in my journey how many people came up to me and suggested or did things that I didn't ask for, but they were amazing things. And when you're talking about leading your teams, lead them in such a way that they instill that within themselves as part of the team. But you know what? They also begin to believe in you in amazing ways. And they start interacting with you as their leader, even different ways that are much more positive, much more synergistic, much more miraculous in results and things like that. That's a key aspect of leadership that a lot of people don't really understand, particularly if you're talking about just a rote academic definition of it, kind of thing. It's one of those insights. And the challenge of that, and Jill, I think you probably know this, but the challenge of that is, guess what? Every person you interact with is a little bit different.
Yeah. So
and
true.
You know what? If I interact with you or somebody else over here, guess what? Each person, in order to reach that goal of really helping them become that, even without my just dictating to them, guess what? How I interact with Jill or this person over here or this person over here, all that's going to be just a little different. And as a leader, I have to gain an insight in my people and who they really are and how I really connect with them to make that happen all within themselves. And so many people today, and Jill, my guess is you'll probably in your brain anyway, nod your head in agreement when I say this, but so many people that are leaders today, their whole focus is just, how can I take credit for this? And you know what? That's not what it's about. When the team gets awarded and they're all almost thinking that they did it, and they look at you and you just kind of wink and nod your head at them, you know what? Amazing things can happen. And the true people that are above you in the organization are going to realize the impact that you had when you made that all happen. And so it's an interesting aspect with that little picture from Colonel Myers and I, decades ago, about 1983, I think, something like that. So yeah, almost 40 years ago, kind of thing. And there's just little insights like that from observing how he did what he did and how he interacted with people and things like that. And I was realized that was just my reaction to it. I said, sir, they'll experience chief standards, kind of thing. And but this aspect of that I'd leave with the listeners today is this simple aspect and question of, when you look at leading your team where you are right now with the people that are in your team right now, what do you need to do differently to not only instill that internal expansion within them, but how do you also develop them in such a way that when they interact with each other, they're going to be doing that within each other, even when you're not there.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, that we always talk about when you're talking about military combat. Sometimes you got to have your unit ready to go to fight, even if you're not there, because you may have given up your life or something in the battle, or you may be focused on this particular part of it over here when this part over here does something. And so that whole aspect of that internal, how you're interacting with your people, and that doesn't mean just telling them this, telling them that. It means, how are you connecting with them in such a way that all that is really growing and expanding and becoming within them to make the dramatic and miraculous results. And that's if your whole focus is just about, how can I take credit for this? You know what? You're missing the boat, and they're not getting there. But if you do it in such a way where your team goes crazy, guess what? Your team that you're leading reaches miraculous results, and your bosses go, wow, we got to look at how he did that or she did that, kind of thing. And so all of those are aspects about that. It's not just about kind of telling and dictating and trying to talk your way through it. It's, how are you really going to do that? And so I leave that with the listeners. When they look at their team right now, what do you need to do different to help instill and create that within each of your team members? Because I'll tell you what, amazing things can happen when that occurs. And I'll tell you, I shared this on a previous radio show somewhat. It blew my mind when the head of FAA training for the company that I work with over at the airport said that everybody in the building talked me through the roof.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of how I interact with them, and we interact together. Because you know what? Most of them, I'm not in their section. I'm not their leader or anything like that. Some of them are janitors, kind of thing. But how you develop that type of oneness and synergy and that real togetherness, you know what? That doesn't happen just by talking to people. It's, what do you need to do when you're looking at your team? For those that are listening, what do you need to do differently to help your team become that, even though all you're doing is just interacting with them? And what do you need to do different? And that's a key question that true leaders need to understand.
Oh, thank you. Always love talking to you. We still have a few minutes left, though. I don't want to cut you short, but
Yeah.
you always come to like an end summary. But yeah, you still got more time.
You know what? And it is interesting because you know what? If you want to talk about, a leader wants to talk, you get a lot of people that are managers that just want to call attention to themselves. They want their team to do well so that I can get all the credit for it. You know what? That disconnects a lot of it. And
Yeah.
and if questions, if I was coaching somebody like that, I would ask him, so what defines the credit you'll get? I would ask him that question and get them to think about it, and the bottom line is your credit based on just what you did today, or is your credit based on how your team is becoming infinitely amazing, and how your people are so much better? And oh, by the way, guess what? The company's better because the people that work for you are so much better. And you remember when I was in that class, I shared it on a radio show previously, when I was in that class in the Air Force and I was a captain and I was the only officer in the class, and the instructor had us do that little scenario. I think I shared with you before. But the idea is, if your people are better, and not because you just told them what to do, not just because they're doing what you told them to do, but because they're becoming something with internally that's amazing, kind of thing, then guess what? They're better, you're better, the company is better because of that. And so when you think about your role as a leader, what does that really look like? And what do you need to do so that your team members have that internal thing that just goes like this as they do? And you know what? It's not anything you specifically said, but it's something that they became because of it. And that's huge. And it's like I say, that's something that a lot of people don't understand. It's not just about dictating and telling and pointing fingers, because you're disconnecting people when you do that. But if you interact with them, now, if you get somebody in your team that's trying to play control freak games, is there a time when you got to put the wall up? Yep. And if you got somebody that's all they want to do, guess what? Maybe they shouldn't be on your team.
Yeah.
And that can get into a whole other discussion on interviews and what questions might you ask and stuff to really get to know the people and everything. But it's this aspect of leadership that it's really about leading your team in such a way that your team members really get that internal within them, that internal magical success to grow, and they become something that you didn't even think they'd ever become. And you sit there and you go, wow, kind of thing. And so all those are just some aspects about it, but it's just one picture of the critical difference that really is something that leaders need to have a sense of. And how do you really connect with your people, and how do you need to do it different to make it infinitely better? How do you make it such that they believe in themselves, such that they come up with the magical results and solutions that you didn't even think about?
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here, Randy. Remind us how we can contact you.
Sounds good. Well, I'll tell you what, as you know, it's you can go to I don't do sales calls, as you know. I just build relationships. I mean, if somebody calls me and they have a need, yeah, we'll come up with something. But you can go to my website, coachingforrelevance.com, and down at the bottom of it, it has my cell phone and my email. And if somebody wants to call or send me an email, we'll definitely get on and have a chat. And I just look forward to building relationships and having maybe a positive impact. Hopefully, sometimes some of the most amazing things can happen in just a 5-minute conversation. So you just never know.
Good. Well, thank you so much, Randy, for being here. And again, coachingforrelevance.com. Reach out. He's always available. He's good like that. Thank you so much. Hallelujah.
There you go, girl.
Again, Randy. Have a fantastic day.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.